A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Welcome to another edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. My name is Cam Edwards. Glad you're with us on the program today. Cody Wisniewski is going to join us from the Firearms Policy Coalition. We're going to talk about an anniversary that I had frankly hoped we would get a present for, the one-year anniversary of the oral arguments in Bianchi versus Brown. This is a gun ban case, specifically a case dealing with Maryland's ban on so-called assault weapons. Oral arguments in this case were heard a year ago on Wednesday, December 6th. I didn't want to write about it because I thought if I write about the anniversary on the day it happens, my story is probably going to be outdated. I probably should have done that so that we could have gotten an opinion. But instead, the anniversary passed. No opinion from the three-judge panel in the Fourth Circuit on the constitutionality of Maryland's ban on so-called assault weapons. So now it's been more than a year since oral arguments were held, and we are still awaiting that decision. We're going to talk with that case and a couple of others. Talk about that case and a couple of others with Cody Wisniewski of the Firearms Policy Coalition here in just a minute. Before we get to that, however, let's talk about this for just a moment. Biden's America. It's crushing us. You've got companies laying off tens of thousands of workers, one after the other. Americans working two jobs just to get by. Inflation pushing hardworking families to the brink. Just look at the price of lunch meat next time you go to the grocery store. And a digital dollar could be coming down the pipeline to completely destroy our way of life. The truth is, you need a plan. You know it, and I know it. And that's why you should call Goldco, so you can diversify your savings and investments with gold and silver before things get worse. They're a six-time Inc. 5000 winner, 2022 Company of the Year, with thousands of five-star reviews, and they've helped people like you and me place over $1 billion in gold and silver. They're offering up to $10,000 in free silver while supplies last. And if you call them today, qualified callers will get a free Ronald Reagan half-ounce silver coin. So don't wait. Call Goldco at 855-412-3806 today. That's 855-412-3806. And now, let's turn to our conversation with the Firearms Policy Coalition's Cody Wisniewski, talking about the Bianchi case as well as a couple of the other lawsuits that are percolating around the court system across the country. Take a look and a listen. Cody, thanks so much for coming on the program. It's good seeing you, sir.
Of course. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Cam.
Yeah, man. So I got to ask, was I alone in kind of hoping that the Fourth Circuit would use the one-year anniversary of the oral arguments in Bianchi versus Brown to actually release its opinion in this case?
You were certainly not alone. We were watching the calendar pretty closely, but unfortunately, that 1 year anniversary has now come and passed.
Yeah, it is a shame. I mean, we know the Fourth Circuit's, we've got this other three-judge panel that recently concluded that Maryland's handgun qualification license is unconstitutional. I don't know what is the reason for the delay. I mean, that oral argument was held back in March. We already have a decision. We don't know, right? It's not like the three-judge panel has a deadline where they have to issue their opinion by a certain time. But do you see this as a good or a bad sign that it's been now more than 12 months and we don't have a decision?
I don't really think it's either, to be honest. It could be, you could throw a million theories at why the circuit court is taking so long. So, sometimes you get opinions at a circuit courts within 2 to 3 months. That, in terms of litigation, is light speed. It is pretty uncommon that you get over a year. There was a point in time in the past, however, that the Ninth Circuit's average time to decision was 18 months. So it's not uncommon to happen in this space. And you could draw conclusions either way, right? You could say, well, maybe it's because they're trying to, draft a really strong opinion one way or another. Maybe it's because they're battling back and forth on dissents or concurrences. It would be really difficult to know exactly why it's dragging on. But I think one thing that's really hard to remember in these contexts is that in our world, we're paying so much attention to timing on these cases because we're talking about violations of constitutionally protected right. What most lawyers see a lot of times in just general civil litigation is a 12-month delay in a 20-year contract dispute's no big deal. So sometimes you get these really weird forces where you would hope that courts would pay attention to cases like these a little bit more closely when there are rights at issue.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And I've used the phrase court time in the past, right? Things are operating on court time because, listen, we talk about the Supreme Court, obviously we would have loved to have seen the Supreme Court get involved in some of these emergency requests when, we're dealing with Antonyuk in New York or the Illinois gun ban. And as frustrating as it is, I don't think it's a sign that the court has all of a sudden turned anti-gun. I think it is more of a dispute about when the court gets involved at an early stage in litigation. And we've heard people like Chief Justice John Roberts say, hey, he thinks that the courts are the Supreme Court maybe getting involved a little too often. So I'm with you. But again, we're still talking about a constitutional right? And every day that these laws are in place, rights are being denied. People are being subjected to an infringement of the rights. So, yeah, for my attitude, it's like, hurry up, take the first case you can. But I understand that's not the same perspective that the judges and the justices may have here. So we've got the Bianchi case out there, and hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll get a decision there soon. We've also got not an anniversary, but a deadline today, right? The deadline for public comments on the ATF's latest proposed rule. So we've had our rule on going back to the Trump administration banning bump stocks. Then when Joe Biden came around, it was frames and receivers, right? And then it was stabilizing braces. And now the ATF wants to redefine who is engaged in the business. Basically, who should have to get a federal firearms license when they are selling firearms. Can you talk about what this proposed rule looks like and why it is so troubling?
Yeah, well, at first you think they would have learned their lesson by now, right?
Right.
The bump stock rule has been struck down by several courts, is now pending on cert before the Supreme Court. We had the case Vanderstock, which is the frame or receiver case, where we were successful there. And now we're just trying to determine the final scope of relief in the case. And then, of course, we had the pistol brace case, which was our mock litigation, where we were successful there and got the first injunction against it in the country, and have been, successful in litigating against that rule. So, you would think maybe once bitten, twice shy, but apparently the ATF is the exact opposite. So they're just going to plow ahead again and issue another rule that they don't have any authority to do. But this rule basically, I mean, the simplest way to look at it is they're just trying to change the way that they apply the engaged in the business rule, which requires people to have, an FFL if they're engaged in the business of selling or buying firearms. Basically, what they're doing is they're trying to make engaged in the business, that term, be so broad that it would capture nearly every transaction in the United States, or it would at least make people think that any transaction could subject them to prosecution. And I mean, it's down to one of the exemplars given by the ATF rule is if you purchase a firearm, if you sell a firearm and during that sale convey that you may want to sell another, or you may even want to buy a firearm, then you're probably engaged in the business. And they shift the burden in this rule. So they say, if you do that, if you do any number of these things, they presume that you are engaged in the business, and then you have to prove you're not. And so they take the burden and they flip it completely on its head, and now you're essentially guilty until proven innocent.
It's amazing. I mean, these standards are so subjective that you don't even have to derive a profit, right, from a sale of a single firearm to be considered engaged in the business. In fact, you don't even have to complete the sale of a firearm to be engaged in the business of selling firearms.
Which is kind of astounding when the federal definition of engaged in the business is predominantly to derive a profit. Like that's the definition. So they're just going so far beyond that scope. And that's what we're seeing from the ATF now. We saw it at the end of the Trump administration. We're seeing it under the Biden administration. They're taking the congressional law and they're just trying to stretch it as far as humanly possible to give them as much authority as humanly possible and scare people, right? It just puts people in this place where they can't know whether their firearm is a pistol or an SBR. They can't know whether, the lower receiver that they have is a lower or not. Now they can't know if they engage in a private sale, if they're engaged in the business without a license or not. And all of these things bear criminal penalty. I mean, we're talking felony charges. We're talking 10 years in prison. This is not, a misdemeanor or a speeding ticket. So they're playing with people's rights. They're playing with people's lives, and they're trying to scare people into just not engaging in any of this activity at all.
Absolutely right. And I'm glad you point out the vagueness of this, right? Because it would be one thing if there was a clear, bright line that we thought went way too far. And we could say, okay, move that line back, right? But that's the thing. There is no clear, bright line. By design, they want it to be as vague as possible. And we've seen that with some of these other rules too, right? The rule of lenity actually came into play in the challenge, I believe, in the Vanderstock case, right? Like, how do you know if you're violating the law or not? And the ATF can't really tell you. They can say, well, you probably are, but we can't tell you for sure, right? And so you're right. When there is that vagueness, when there is that uncertainty, most people are going to err on the side of not committing a federal felony, not running the risk of a 10-year prison sentence or a $250,000 fine. And for the gun control groups who are, working not just hand in hand with the Biden administration, but are working out of the White House right now in the Office of Gun Violence Prevention, that's as good as Congress passing a new law, right? Because it's still having that same chilling effect on gun owners.
Absolutely. And these rules are trying to imbue all this discretion in the ATF, all this discretion in the director. And it doesn't allow people to know what the law is, what the rules are. I mean, go beyond the fact that all of these are blatantly unconstitutional, that we're so far away from a constitutional form of government, that we're beyond, a government that actually recognizes and protects people's right to keep and bear arms in the true way that it should. We're well beyond that. But now what we've got is at least before, people knew what was okay and what wasn't, what they could do and what they couldn't, what the ATF would charge them for and what it wouldn't. Now, you have no idea. I mean, you have no idea. If you sell a firearm in its original packaging with its manuals to your son in a state where private transfers are illegal, I mean, you could possibly be engaged in the business. And this scoops even further, right? Even in a state where you have to go and get a background check for a private transfer, you could go get a background check for that private transfer, do the private transfer. You still, according to the ATF, might have done something that subjects you to, investigation for unlawfully being engaged in the business of selling firearms, even if you follow your state process. I mean, it scoops so far.
All right. So the public comment period ends today. What's the next step after the public comment period ends? Is there obviously then, I guess, a time for review, and then the ATF will publish the final rule, and that's when groups like FPC can say, all right, we'll see you in court?
Yes, sir. Yeah, it's the Bianchi test, or the Bianchi plan. You sit and wait. So, unfortunately, the agency it'll sit, it'll review comments. Normally in this process, this is when the agency would amend the rule, would address the issues. They're legally required to address every unique comment that's submitted to them, as long as they're not, swearing at the ATF. Those ones they don't have to consider according to law. But they'll review all these comments, they'll consider it, they will potentially amend the rule. In some instances in the past, this is when the agencies go, you know what, this might be a bad idea, and withdraw the rule. That doesn't seem to be very common in this administration. So I don't know that we're going to see that from this ATF, but there will be a period of time where the agency will review, and then they will publish the final rule. Normally, that means that there's, some announcement about the effective date of the rule. Obviously, we saw in the pistol brace context that the ATF basically made the rule effective immediately, which they're legally not allowed to do. But again, this is now the world that we live in. So there is normally a publication, and then they inform everybody of the effective date. And then that's when you have the process of that additional review. And then we get to see whether or not it warrants bringing them into court.
I guess there is a silver lining to all of this. There will be no shortage of potential plaintiffs to take on this lesson, right? Because almost every gun owner who might sell a firearm could run afoul of this rule and could be a potential plaintiff. So, I guess you've got a wide body of litigants to choose from when the time comes. And I want to ask you as well, Cody, how likely do you think it is that this is the last proposed rule we see from the ATF before the elections next November? I keep seeing, here's what I'm worried about. I keep seeing these judges say, well, these bans on AR-15s and modern sporting rifles, they're fine because they're like machine guns, right? And machine guns aren't protected by the Second Amendment. I see groups like Guns Down America telling the ATF, you need to reclassify Glocks as machine guns because we got these, Glock switches out there and they're converting semi-automatic handguns into fully automatic handguns. So treat Glocks like machine guns, treat semi-automatic handguns like machine guns. I'm really concerned that if Biden wants to go all in on gun control, that we'll see this rule from the ATF saying, hey, you know what? Actually, we are going to, impose these same rules. We're going to start treating semi-automatic firearms, either, gas-operated rifles like the Go Safe Act, or maybe just even a broader definition of all semi-automatic firearms. We're going to treat them like machine guns because we think they can be readily converted to machine guns. And I think that would be sort of the gun control nuclear option. And I'm not convinced that they're not going to deploy that between now and next November.
In a normal, insane world, I would tell you that the rulemaking process generally takes a lot of time. Usually it takes the agencies a lot of time to get sources together, to draft a proposed rule, to then put that rule out for notice and comment. Then there's a 90-day waiting or a 90-day comment period generally. Then they have to review all the comments. Then they have to consider them. They have to put them into the final rule, draft a final rule, publish it. So the rulemaking process is rather slow. Generally, it's pretty uncommon that you get big rulemakings over kind of election years or potential changes in administration, because what would happen would be, right, if you had this very massive rulemaking that's out pending, and then you get a new administration that comes in, they would just scrap it immediately. So, or some, maybe they should scrap it immediately. I guess I won't profess. But in a sane world, I would tell you, there's probably not a lot of time between now and the election. It seems unlikely that they would marshal that many resources just for something that has the potential to be scrapped at the end of the day. We're not in a sane world anymore. And ATF is no longer playing by, the standard rules that all of the agencies have been playing by. And so who knows, right? You could take out the side of maybe it's not legally advisable, or maybe it's not a good use of resources, but that doesn't mean that they're not going to determine that it's not politically viable, or that it's not a good opportunity to tout something on a campaign trail. So we're in a place where, they're issuing these rules that are blatantly in violation of the ATF's statutory authority. And basically their strategy has been, we're going to issue it, you sue us, and we'll play it out in court. And they're just dragging these cases out, and they're trying to throw these rights and throw all of these issues into this, vat of uncertainty. So for a period of time, at least, people are uncomfortable with what they may or may not legally be allowed to own at the time. We've seen all the uncertainty come around. What's an 80%er? When is it a firearm? What does it have to ship with? If it ships with a jig, now all of a sudden it's a firearm. We've seen this with pistol races, right? Can I not? Can I possess it next to it? Can I not? Now it's going to be, hey, can I or can I not sell this? Can I or can I not buy this? What's the process here? And it seems like the administration no longer cares about issuing rules that are either legal or constitutional. And instead, we're getting into this place where they're just pushing the boundaries as far as they possibly can and are waiting for courts to tell them no.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what concerns me, because this would definitely push the boundaries. The Biden administration has not done this. You've had gun control groups like Brady that have been arguing for this very thing in civil litigation, right? Telling judges, hey, treat semi-automatic handguns as if they're machine guns. The courts haven't really bought into that. Some of the judges dealing with bans on so-called assault weapons have, but in the civil litigation, we haven't seen a judge willing to bite. But this is definitely a strategy that the gun control groups are pursuing. I think it would be a huge political mistake for Joe Biden to do that. You want to talk about energizing gun owners in 2024. Tell them you're coming for their handguns. Tell them you're coming for the most commonly owned firearms in the country. But I'm not convinced that the Biden administration is all that great when it comes to political strategy either. So they could make a mistake, and it doesn't mean that wouldn't impact our rights. All right. So final question. This is going to be a really tough one for you, Cody. If folks want to help what Firearms Policy Coalition is doing all around the country, defending our right to keep bear arms, taking the fight to these anti-gunners, how do they do it?
Well, that is the toughest of the interview so far. So you can you can find everything about FPC at firearmspolicy.org. You can join FPC, become a member, support the fight at joinfpc.org. You can find everything on socials at Gun Policy. Of course, we've also got FPC Action Foundation, which you can find online, FPC Action on all of the socials. So go ahead, take a look at what we're doing, take a look at the work. If you like it, if you're happy with it, we'd really appreciate your support, because we can't do these things without people like you partnering with us, right? I mean, none of the plaintiffs that we work with, none of the clients that we work with, they're never footing legal bills, right? These guys are coming in and they're representing all of the people like them, all of the people like us in litigation, and they're putting their name on it. And court costs are really expensive. It's expensive to litigate cases. It's expensive to be around on Bianchi for years and years, and to go back to the circuit court and then to wait for another year. So these things are really important. So we really appreciate everybody's support.
Absolutely. And we appreciate everything that you guys are doing there at the FPC. Cody, thanks so much for spending a couple of minutes with us today. And I look forward to doing this again very soon.
Thanks, Cam. Happy to be here, and would be happy to come back again whenever.
My thanks to Cody for joining us on the program, and looking forward to having him back again here very soon. Now let's turn our attention to today's Armed Citizen story, our good deed of the day, and our recidivist report. We'll start with that. Now, I will say that this is not a case of, I take that back. This is from Nashville, Tennessee. I was going to say this isn't a case of somebody who's got violent crimes, but actually that's not the case. There are some crimes of violence in the accused serial shoplifter's 100 plus criminal charges. Yeah. How does somebody rack up 100 charges? DeWanda Parrish, she's figured out a way. She's only 34 years old, but over 100 criminal charges in her history, dating back to shortly after she turned 18 in 2007, apparently. WKRN reports that repeat offenses after that go on and on. Some of them turn violent. A lot of these cases are theft, are shoplifting, but there are some cases where assaults were involved. Her first theft case was in 2013, with more than half a dozen theft charges to follow soon after. More theft charges in 2015 and 2016. Court documents showing 4 different incidents in 2016 alone. Several of those cases, again, turning violent, with Parrish facing assault charges. But it sounds like she's been arrested dozens of times. There's been very little time behind bars as a consequence for these crimes. WKRN spoke with the president of Alert Mid-South, Glenn Allred, who says that more punishment is needed. He says, I've seen in the past where they've already had their bondsmen set up ready to go, paid in full, ready to go before they were captured. They may be stealing for months, but they know eventually they're going to get caught, and about around how much their bond will be. So they'll go ahead and they'll prepay their bond, basically as, insurance, right? So when they do get caught, they're right out the door. It's amazing. Parrish's latest charges involving theft of a purse, or several purses actually, back in July. A arrest report said that she dropped her phone when she was running out of the store. Phone revealed several indications that Parrish was involved in selling stolen property. Right now, she's being held in the Metro jail on a $100,000 bond, but we'll see how long that lasts. Today's Armed Citizen story from Florida. Now, this is a weird headline, too. Burglar hospitalized after being shot by victim at an Auburndale gas station. It wasn't really a burglar. Sounded like it was more of an assault. You've got a guy sitting in his car at a gas station. Police say a man walked up to him and punched him in the face through the open window. That's when the individual in the car drew his firearm and shot the man who had punched him one time. And then the man left. The armed citizen actually stayed on the scene. Police, as they were on their way to the 7-Eleven where this happened, got diverted for a call about a man with a gunshot wound at a local hotel. When they arrived, they found a man lying in the parking lot with a single gunshot wound to his abdomen. He was responsive to law enforcement, taken to a local to a local hospital, identified as a 36-year-old Juan Jose Martinez. Non-life-threatening injuries, apparently, for Mr. Martinez. The investigation revealed that the shooting took place at that 7-Eleven gas station. The police were able to talk with several eyewitnesses as well as the armed citizen. They also were able to look at surveillance video that showed that the shooting was in self-defense, according to police. They say eyewitness testimony also confirmed what happened after the incident. They don't know what prompted Martinez to punch the stranger. He didn't know him, and the guy was just sitting in his car. But according to the Auburndale Police Department, due to unknown threats that may follow from Martinez, the victim was placed in a well-found fear for his life. Martinez has been charged with burglary with battery, I guess for reaching into the car, which is a first-degree felony. After he's released from the hospital, he'll be taken to the Polk County Jail. The armed citizen, again, not going to be facing any charges. Finally, today, in the right place, at the right time, willing able to do the right thing. Some good Samaritans in Florida as well, outside a Publix grocery store, who helped subdue a guy who attacked a Salvation Army bell ringer. Man, you want to talk about an easy way to get coal in your stocking for Christmas. That would be the way to do it. Again, thankfully, there were some good Samaritans involved. Apparently, I don't think either of them had a firearm, but Billy Richard was the bell ringer in question. She says that she had just finished her shift for the Salvation Army, was walking to her car when a guy, identified as 42-year-old Robert Moore, attacked her. Richard said, he told me to give him my keys. I said, no, I turned away from him. He was still all over me. I told him to leave me alone, told him to get away. And I screamed, and I said, I have pepper spray, and I'm going to spray you. And I turned around and went like that, and he grabbed my keys and took off. She then fell to the ground. Moments later, one of the Good Samaritans runs across the parking lot, tackles Moore. Another one joins in, holds him down until police arrived. One of those Good Samaritans, identified only as a man named Dan, who's an Army veteran who served in Iraq and Afghanistan, said he tried to run and he wasn't able to get far. And I took him down and fought him for a while. I think he was on some drugs. Said I didn't really give it any thought. I just saw it and just blacked out. I really don't remember catching him or throwing him down. Now, Billy Richard calls Dan and the other Good Samaritan who helped take Moore down to the ground her angels, saying, I was really blessed. They came to my rescue. I didn't break a bone. I could have been stabbed. I could have been shot or anything. I'm blessed. Dan actually suffered from some broken fingers as well as some bruising, but he says he's just glad to help. He says there are people who choose to be evil, and the only way that we can prevent it is people need to step in and do something when they see it go down. So in the right place, at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing. Dan and the other anonymous Good Samaritan, we thank you very much for your very, very good deed. That's all the time we've got for you in this edition of Bearing Arms Cam & Company. We will be back with more on Monday. But in the meantime, be sure to check out BearingArms.com for the latest Second Amendment news and information from all across the nation. I'd encourage you as well to become a VIP or VIP Gold member. All you have to do, go to BearingArms.com/subscribe, use the promo code GUNRIGHTS, and you can get a significant savings on your VIP or VIP Gold membership. And in return, we're going to give you exclusive content you won't find anywhere else. News stories and analysis that matter, because your support matters a great deal. So thank you again. Have a great weekend and the rest of your week, I guess, until we talk again. Be well, be safe, and be free.